Hello and welcome to Portfolio Matters. In this week's Share Talk, we will be talking about Anglo-Asian Mining, a British mining company with assets in Azerbaijan. But before we do that, Richard will read the disclaimer.
Thank you, Keith, and I hope you're keeping nice and warm on this very cold, snowy day. Everything discussed during the Portfolio Matters podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Listeners should be aware that we will be discussing securities that we own or have a financial interest in. Please do your own research or consult a professional investment advisor before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned on the show. A full disclaimer can be found at the end. So Keith, tell us about this company.
Okay, Anglo-Asian Mining. Now, this is an interesting special situation. Anglo-Asian Mining, this is the share price. You can see that it's a gold miner, so its share price has basically kept up with the gold price. But I would say that the share price does not take into account the extraordinary events that happened to the company in 2020. So Anglo-Asian has assets in Azerbaijan as a result of a 1997 agreement with the Azerbaijan government in which it purchased 6 licenses, 3 of which were then in Azerbaijani territory, which was occupied by Armenia. Now, during 2020, obviously, there was a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan was backed by Turkey and managed to get back under its own control a lot of this territory. And as a result of that, it has got back 3 of its mining areas. And so this is a special situation. And the question is, what's it got back? How much is that worth? What can it get access to those sites? And what's the timescale? So in summary, I think this is a very interesting special situation in which Anglo-Asian Mining have potentially got back the largest gold mine in the Caucasus. And the question is, can they actually move to start mining there? And what is the timescale? But as you've seen from the earlier share price, the new opportunities that Anglo-Asian appears to have got have not really been reflected in the share price. And so I think this is very interesting.
Okay.
However, as you will see as we go through this, the assets they've got back were exploited by Armenia when it was under their control, and all the infrastructure they put in pointed towards Armenia. So there are no roads between Azerbaijan and these assets. However, that is due to change. And actually, as a result of the ceasefire agreement with Armenia, new roads are going to be put in which will connect one of its existing contract areas with mainland Azerbaijan. And you'll understand that better when I go through. The one negative I would say is that the production sharing agreement and the tax agreement it has with the Azerbaijan government is quite bad. We'll go through that. Okay, so what does it do? Currently, it has 3 active contract areas and 4 mines. Its biggest mine is the Geographic open pit, and most of its processing facilities are there. The Ugar open pit is nearby, and everything is trucked to Geographic for processing, and the Gadir underground mine is very high yield. It also has the Ordubad contract area, which is potentially interesting, but as you'll see, it is separated from Azerbaijan by Armenia. And so getting to it is quite difficult. But as a result of the ceasefire, a road will be put in, and suddenly that whole contract area becomes accessible. Okay, so these are what it has at the moment. So there's Geographic, which is gold and copper and is big, 1.3 million tons of ore at 0.9 grams a ton were mined in 2020. There's underground mine there as well, which has higher yield. The Gadir mine has also has a high yield, 2.5 grams a ton. And there's a further underground mine at Gosha. And then it processes these, the gold and the copper. And Geographic has lots of potential exploration sites, some of which are shown here. But frankly, if you're interested in this, go and have a look at the website. That's not our prime concern today. Our prime concern today is all the new assets. Okay, so this is a map of Azerbaijan, which is showing where the company's assets are. The ones in green, Gosha and Geographic, are currently its main mining area. The Ordubad contract area is down here, bottom left. But as you can see, it's separated from Azerbaijan by Armenia, and so it's difficult to access. The ones in blue are the ones which have been restored to the company after the war with Armenia. Okay, so this is a map of how things stand after the war. So the Vejnali site, bottom left, that is back under Azerbaijani control, as is Sutali, top left. Kizil Bulag is in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now this is an area, the orange area is essentially still, it's under Russian peacekeeping. Okay, so the ceasefire agreement put in this corridor here between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. And essentially, although Azerbaijan have restored this contract area to the company, they don't have control over it. Yeah? That area is still controlled by Russian peacekeepers.
Right.
So there is no immediate prospect of them actually accessing that mine. However, it now has potentially control over Sutali. And Sutali is the largest mine in the Caucasus, gold mine in the Caucasus. Vejnali, we will go into, but there is a mine there. And in both Sutali and Vejnali, mining operations were put in by the Armenians, and essentially they seem to have just left. So they didn't destroy any of the infrastructure. And we've got a video. Okay, so what is the status of the restored contract areas? So all these problems arise as a result of the 1994 with Armenia, in which Armenia occupied 3 districts of Azerbaijan. In 1997, Anglo-Asian Mining obtained 6 production sharing agreements with the Azerbaijan government, but could only access 3 of those. 3 of them remained under Armenian control, and the company could not get to those sites. But the contracts were reaffirmed by Azerbaijan in 2006. So all those contracts are valid. And as of 2020, all areas have been restored to the company. And the production sharing agreements for the 3 restored areas have been reset to year 0. So it's as though they're starting again in 1997. So you have 5 years of exploration license, 15 years of production, and then 2 further 5-year extensions possible. So you've got 30 years of mining license starting now. Okay, so what are these sites? Sutley, so that's the contract area. The asset is Zod. There's a Zod gold and silver mine, which they claim is a world-class gold mine with 2019 reserves in excess of 8 million. And those reserves were actually declared by the Armenian government, you know, while they were exploiting it. Now, one of the problems is it's an open pit mine which actually straddles the border. But 75% of the mine is within Azerbaijan, and there is no mining going on at the moment. Now, during the Armenian occupation, it was mined by a Swiss-Russian company called GeoPro Mining Gold. But anyway, I'll show you a video in a second, which will show you the current state of the mine. The key points are that it's very productive, but there's no main rail and road link with Azerbaijan.
Right.
All the links are with Armenia, and a road needs to be put in. However, the Azerbaijan government has now contracted for a 195-kilometer road, which will run past the mine, has been commissioned. But obviously that's going to take time. And you'll notice, by the way, that the picture on bottom right here, which is of the mine, that comes from Google Earth. And that is the best that the company can come up with as a picture of the mine, is something from Google Earth, which shows that they haven't been able to access it.
You can't get there. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me try and see if this works. We'll show you a video.
This is a ski resort, is that right, Keith?
So the Azerbaijan military have just got there, essentially, and you can see Azerbaijani soldiers wandering around. Now, I think what I want you to take away from this video is the equipment and the factory and the facilities. They're intact. Essentially, the Armenians have just walked away.
Yeah.
They have not destroyed either the mine or the equipment. And it may not be terribly high tech, but it's intact.
And it's there. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow, it'd be a great place to explore, wouldn't it?
Yeah, look at the size of those trucks. So you see, the lockers are all locked. They've just gone home. That is the Azerbaijan military.
Yeah. Makes you want to sign up.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video, which shows the current state of the Zod mine. Now, apparently, and I'd like to thank various posters on the lse.co.uk website for digging around in GeoPro Mining's various public statements. GeoPro Mining mined 175,000 ounces of gold from Zod in 2019 and around 150,000 ounces in 2020, which is obviously COVID affected. Now, the current annual production of Anglo Asian is 80,000. So if Anglo Asian can exploit this existing mine with all the equipment intact and the facilities intact, if it can build the infrastructure to get there, then it's lucked into a doubling of its production capability in one go. Sorry, trebling. It'll go from 80,000 to potentially 230,000 or and above. Okay, so the next asset it has retrieved, or it's been contract area it's been given back, is, forgive my pronunciation, Kızıl Bulag. Now the trouble is, this is currently under the occupation of Russian peacekeepers. So it is a copper and molybdenum mine, and there are facilities there, and if you dig around online you'll see very nice pictures of the new facility that the Valex group have built. But the reality is there's no way that the company is actually going to get access to this mine in the near future, and so frankly we will skip it. Okay, and the last one is Vejnali, which is a contract area, but we don't really know what's there. What the company says is there was some mining conducted under the Armenian occupation. And when Anglo-Asian can access the area, they'll have a look round. Okay, now the other area that they currently have is Ordubad. But the trouble is, Ordubad, bottom left here, the red dot, is separated from Azerbaijan by Armenia. And so you can explore there, but it's difficult to get to. And frankly, there's no way of getting the ore out. So the bottom is, the south of this map is Iran. So you need to be able to get the ore or the finished product to Azerbaijan for export. And currently there's no way of doing that. However, as part of the ceasefire agreement, a corridor will be ceded to Azerbaijan through which they can build road and rail links between the Nakhchivan autonomous area in which Ordubad is contained with mainland Azerbaijan, in which case that contract area becomes accessible. So this is a more detailed map of the 4 contract areas, essentially. So number 1 is Sutli. You'll see it's in the mountains. Yeah, so a road needs to be built to access it from Azerbaijan, as opposed from Armenia over here. Kızıl Bulag is inaccessible, but Vejnali at the bottom is unexplored, and Ordubad is now, if there's a corridor built, you'll be able to get ore or finished products back to the mainland. But obviously none of this is going to happen tomorrow. Infrastructure needs to be built. Okay, so the investment case. Currently, Anglo-Asian mining is profitable, cash generative, net cash, got no debt, and it pays dividends. It's got a very straightforward management team who are very straightforward in their CEO interviews, of which there are many online. However, the production sharing agreement with the Azeri government is quite harsh. So the production sharing agreement. So the Azerbaijan government receives 51% of net profits, but net profits are subject to a 25% minimum of revenues. So if profits are less than 25% of revenues, then the profits are assumed to be 25% of revenues. And then Azerbaijan gets 51% of that 25%. Okay. Now, if that means that costs have not been properly discounted, they are rolled forwards.
It's basically it's able to roll that overpayment forwards and offset it against future income.
Exactly. Thank you, Richard. That is much better put. Okay, so since 2019, when operations commenced, essentially that has been the case. So the Azeri government is getting 12.75% of revenues. And the company estimates that going forwards, that will remain the case until 2023.
Okay.
But if you do the maths, this is not a very nice agreement for shareholders. So if we assume that, let's say revenues are 100 million and profits 50, under the current arrangements where the Azerbaijan government gets 12.75%, then Anglo-Asian receives 25.3 million in profits. Because I should also add that there is corporate tax of 32%, which needs to be paid. Under the final regime, where the company only gets 49% of profits and then has to pay 32% income tax, that 50 million of gross profit for Anglo-Asian is only 16.7 million for shareholders. So that frankly is tough. This company has to be very profitable for shareholders to get much out of it. Okay, so what are the current financials? You'll see that operating profit has been ticking up very nicely. It's now solidly profitable with a very good operating margin and a good return on capital employed. The thing is, this is a low-cost gold producer. However, because of the tax regime, it needs to be. You know, it needs to be low cost for shareholders to get anything out of it. And it currently pays a decent dividend, which is 2 times covered, and it's got net cash. So, in summary, positives. Net cash, cash generative, pays dividend, got a 1.3% yield. The management are very plain speaking and seem very competent. They've developed the Anglo-Asian from the start. They are been in place since the beginning. It's had recent exploration success, very little COVID disruption. The all-in sustaining costs are great, $591 an ounce. You know, when you consider that, for example, Centamin had all-in sustaining costs of $1,600 an ounce in the last quarter, that is, you know, obviously much, much better. But the big thing is the restoration of contract areas. The negatives. Well, the production sharing agreement is pretty harsh, frankly. Corporate tax of 32%, and that is after the 51% of taxes go to the Azeri government. There's also a question of the mine life. I mean, it's all it will say in the annual report is that the Geographic mine has a mine life to at least 2024. But there are lots of exploration areas, and you know, I'm sure that can be extended, but that's something to worry about. The shares are also quite illiquid. The other things are, a lot of these contract areas, you just don't know how long that it's going to take to build the infrastructure and get access to them. And any development will absolutely require capital. And how much capital and what terms are unknown.
Well, thank you very much, Keith. That's really interesting. And I have to say, it's a little bit of an eye-opener, isn't it? That you do need to go into these resource companies with your eyes wide open when it comes to development costs and revenue sharing with governments. So
absolutely,
it's a salutary lesson of be really careful. Don't look at it on a superficial basis.
Now, I completely agree with you, Richard, and particularly when it comes to the production sharing agreements and also financing. If they do develop these mines, the financing of these things is a way to give away a lot of shareholder value.
Yeah.
But my final thoughts about Anglo-Asian are, I think this is going to be a story stock. And if you think the share price has hardly moved since all these contract areas were given back to the company, then I suspect that as the company gets access to these areas, there's going to be a constant string of good news.
Yeah. It will be upgrading its resource potential.
Absolutely. There will be lots of upgrades of future production reserves, etc., etc. And the share price moves on good news and positive news flow. So I have bought a decent chunk of this and I've added to it recently on the basis that I think news flow will send the share price up.
Well done. Very interesting, Keith. And thank you very much for that detailed review of Anglo-Asian mining.
You're very welcome.
So
thank you for watching. I hope you will press like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you again for a share talk soon. So it's goodbye from Richard Wheater.
And goodbye from Keith Jordan. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Full disclaimer. The material and information contained in this podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for making a business, legal or any other decision. We may own or have a financial interest in any securities mentioned. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult a professional investment advisor before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned on the show. Whilst we endeavour to ensure that the information presented on the show is correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, with respect to the podcast and website or to any information, products, services or related graphics discussed or presented in the podcast or website. Any reliance you place on such material is strictly at your own risk. You are solely responsible for the investment decisions you make. We will not be responsible for any errors or omissions in the podcast or website, including in articles or postings, for hyperlinks embedded in messages, or for any results obtained from the use of such information, nor will we be liable for any loss or damage, including consequential damages, if any, caused by a reader's reliance on any information provided by the podcast or website. Please do not listen to the podcast if you do not accept self-responsibility for your actions.